What do I feel about all the Disney movies, and where would I rank them if given the choice? Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and I am a big Disney fan. You probably know this if you watch the channel, and if you don't watch my channel, you can tell just by looking at this video. There's a little mermaid gift that a friend made for the wedding. You have an Avengers poster back there, not even for the Avengers movie that I like. You have a Prince and the Frog poster signed by animators, directors, Randy Newman. You have the Disney animated classics right behind me. So yes, I am a huge Disney fan. But where would I rank all the Disney films in terms of greatness? Because here's the thing, as much as Disney fans would like to pretend, not all the animated Disney movies are classics. In fact, some of them are, frankly, pretty terrible. Well, thankfully, I discovered this website a little late, I admit, called Tier Maker, where you could actually make little templates with tiers on, products that you like, whether it be movies, CDs, video games. And I found one that after a little bit of modifying it, because it was one of those lists that didn't have like an F or SS ranking because they wanted to, act like there was nothing as like a Disney movie above all the rest, nor did they want to, acknowledge that there was a truly dumpster fire Disney movie. And it has all the main animated movies. And I figured it would be fun, just as a little side thing, to just rank all the movies in order on their greatness. And the ranking system is pretty simple. You've got SS, those are the movies that are cut above the rest. You have S, A, B, C, D, F, and F is like truly the dumpster fire. And I'm going to go over every single one of them, and I'm going to explain why I gave that rating. So let's start with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the one that started it all. Well, this is a very good one, but despite being the one that started it all, I'm just going to give it an A. I'm going to give it an A because I think it is still an entertaining movie and it still has like a lot of good things about it. Beautiful animation. It is by far one of the most outdated and probably one of the most simple of all the Disney movies. But the next one you have Pinocchio, and I consider Pinocchio to be a cut above the rest Disney movie. Just a great movie in general. You love the When You Wish Upon a Star. The moral, it's one of the few Disney movies where like the villains technically get away at the end and all that jazz. Then we have Fantasia. Another cut above the rest, truly something magnificent. We didn't see anything remotely close to this until, well, actually, that's not true, until some Italians decided to respond to it, and then Disney, of course, did themselves. But Fantasia, the reason that gets a cut above the rest, aside from pretty much introducing surround sound, is that is a movie that decided to experiment with the concept of animation. So it was quite a different experience. Now, Dumbo, I've got some pretty fond memories of Dumbo. Dumbo, by the way, is the first movie I ever saw. I'm going to give it an A. It is short, it's a little bit more simplistic, but I have very personal fond memories of that one. And then we have Bambi, which I'm going to put as like a B. In some ways it's kind of the same thing as Dumbo, but I don't have the same connection to it. Then we have the dark period of Disney, where these are the compilation films. These were movies that, here's the thing, I acknowledge why Disney had to make them. World War II had begun, international markets were cut off, they were helping the military out with educational training films and stuff. They did not have the resources to make full-length animated films again. So they made these compilation films, and they definitely had mixed results. Saludos Amigos, I feel, is pretty much an F. There's not a whole lot of redeeming stuff about it. Three Caballeros, I will give a C, as will, Make My Music, I'm going to put a D. Fun and Fancy Free, I'll put a C. I like the Mickey and the Beanstalk. I didn't like the bongo segment so much. Melody Time, I'd probably put a C. Now, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, that one definitely came the closest to being like an actual movie. I'm going to give that one a B, because the Wind in the Willow segment is very charming, and the Sleepy Hollow segment is still creepy if you are a kid. Then they got back to making real movies again, and this is where I'm going to start sounding like such a bully, but I don't think Cinderella is all that great. In fact, if you haven't watched Cinderella in a while, rewatch it and have this thought come to your mind. Like, it's probably going to bother you. Like, what's with all the mice? Because seriously, Cinderella almost takes back seat to her own story. I actually do like the live action Cinderella more than I like the animated Cinderella. It's very rare that I say that. As for Alice in Wonderland, I gotta give that one a D. I'm sorry, never really liked it. Never made sense to me. It was just bizarre as heck. Peter Pan, I'm also going to give that one a D. No, I'm going to bump that one up to a C. I think that's a very average movie. Peter Pan, ironically, is a movie that does not age very well. Like, for a movie that's about someone who does not want to grow up, the more you grow up, the less it resonates with you, which is strange. Because you think it would resonate with you more the older you get, and yet the movie has like a timeless theme, but it's not told in a timeless way. It's very, very kid-centric. Captain Hook is not a particularly threatening villain. Granted, he's a very memorable villain, but he's not a particularly threatening villain, which is, what I would expect from a kid's villain. However, when you get to Lady and the Tramp, well, things start getting better immediately. Lady and the Tramp is definitely a classic love story by any measure. You have Sleeping Beauty. That's a classic, great animation, great villain. 101 Dalmatians, I'd probably give that a B. It's probably better known for the villain Cruella de Vil, but I do enjoy that movie. Now, Sword in the Stone. I'm going to give that a D. I don't like Sword in the Stone very much, to be perfectly frank. I think the dueling wizard scene between Merlin and Madame Mim, I think that is clearly a highlight. Clearly a highlight. I mean, but even as a kid, it bothered me that the Sword in the Stone itself did not play a bigger role into much of anything. And that's just always bothered me. Now, the Jungle Book, I'm giving that an S. Memorable music, memorable story. Now, there are a couple scenes that are a little pointless, hence it's not a cut above the rest, but it is overall a very good movie. By the way, I also like the live-action remake of that a little bit better than the animated, but not by a whole lot. And The Bare Necessities is a very, very catchy song. Now, unfortunately, afterwards, we start getting to the period where Disney died, Walt Disney himself died, and we start getting into a slump again. We have the Aristocats, which, in my opinion, is a D-rated movie. And this one's going to piss a lot of people off, but I hate Robin Hood. Do not like it at all. And here's one of the problems might be, frankly, that growing up, my parents showed me not only this Robin Hood, but they showed me the Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. Adventures of Robin Hood was way better. So as a kid, and I still kind of have this mentality now, it's like, why watch the inferior product? And the sad thing is, Robin Hood should make for a good Disney movie because animation is a great medium. It truly is. But Robin Hood is actually kind of insulting to the animation medium because I think Disney was in such a dire strait. They actually literally traced over classic scenes from Snow White, Pinocchio, and Jungle Book, and they just reused animation and they reused character designs. I found it to be very insulting personally. I know Robin Hood has a lot of fans. A lot of my friends grew up with it, and every time we watch Robin Hood, I just hated it. Now then, a good movie is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now, the only reason this isn't an A is because it is a compilation collection, and as a result, I think the first two segments are much better than the third. However, it has a great ending. If you ever thought that you would not get teary-eyed at a Winnie the Pooh movie, watch till the end of this one. It really did, it touched on some emotional strings, and there's been good Winnie the Pooh movies since then, but that was probably one of the highlights of the franchise. Now, The Rescuers. Where do I put The Rescuers? The Rescuers is an interesting one for me. I think I'm going to put that one in C. It's fairly average, and it's definitely got an outdated Oscar-nominated song, but I do like it. It's fun. And maybe one of the problems with that is that I like The Rescuers Down Under a little bit more, which, we'll talk about that in a bit. The Fox and the Hound, I would definitely give that a B. I think that's actually probably one of the most challenging of the Disney movies for kids. It tackles prejudice with a lot of sensitivity, And it's a story that works well throughout the years. The reason it's not higher, of course, is that I think they kind of chicken out near the end. Not the end, but, spoiler alert, when Chief gets hit by the train, originally he was supposed to die. And they chickened out where he just broke his leg. And that was always a cop-out. It actually didn't even make a whole lot of sense why Copper hated Todd so much when the consequence was not that big of a deal when you get down to it. Now let's get to the Black Cauldron. This is another complicated one for me. I'm going to give it a D because it's undoubtedly not a good movie. That said, I have to give Disney a lot of credit for attempting it. They truly were trying something different. They had good elements. The Horn King is a very menacing villain. I like the fact that there was no songs. In fact, I think this was the first Disney movie in years, maybe the first time in their history, for all I know, where there was not a single, excluding Fantasia, of course, where there was not a single song in the movie. So that was, and they got Elmer Bernstein to do the score. He did like Psycho and Alfred Hitchcock movies. So there was good things in it. It just objectively wasn't very good. Now we get to The Great Mouse Detective, and I enjoyed that for what it is. It's a B movie. I think Professor Ratigan is definitely a good Disney villain. I also like Oliver and Company. Now, that one's aged a little bit poorer because it's very 80s. But I still like the music, and I still like the characters. Now you get to The Little Mermaid, and I'm going to give The Little Mermaid an S. Yeah, you probably thought I was going to give it an SS. No, I'm not. The SS's are actually rare. They are very rare, and I know that the SS and the Fs are going to be the most contentious, but I really do like The Little Mermaid quite a bit. Who doesn't love Sebastian the crab? Who doesn't like Under the Sea or Kiss the Girl? Ursula is, of course, a great villain. So great that my mom actually banned the movie in the house for years because she really hated the Sea Witch. Now let's get to The Rescuers Down Under. I actually think The Rescuers Down Under is an A movie. I really do. It's very underrated. I was disappointed. I mean, it's another one that you grew up with, and I think that is Disney doing adventure films at their best. I mean, it just has... The chase sequences are great. The action's great. The characters are likable. The score is wonderful. This is another Disney movie that does not have any songs that I can remember. I really can't. And I own the soundtrack. The take flight scene where Cody's like doing the flight with the eagle the first time. That is classic Disney animation. It does not get the credit it deserves, in my opinion. Now, Beauty and the Beast. F. I'm so kidding. No. Of course that's an SS. I mean, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's not my favorite Disney movie, but I will acknowledge that is probably the best movie Disney has ever made. In my opinion. So, where does that leave Aladdin? I'm going to give that an S. Primarily... I mean, I think that one's probably, unfortunately, going to date itself a little bit more than we want to admit. And it's also tied to, ironically, the best thing about the movie, Robin Williams' performance. And that actually puts this movie on very shaky ground for me, believe it or not. Because it is a very, very good movie, and Robin Williams' performance is great. Unfortunately, it's also riddled with pop culture jokes. And... the older the movie gets, the less relevant those jokes become. And here's the other thing. I've always kind of maintained that Aladdin frankly lives and dies on the genie. I've noticed that this movie doesn't start getting great until Robin Williams comes in. The Broadway production is okay until the genie comes in. Then it really takes off. And likewise, the live action movie, the best thing about it, and it was a pretty bad movie overall, was the genie. So, when you have the fact that the genie is making jokes that in 10, 15, 20 years, some people might not even recognize what the jokes are about, that could make Aladdin a little vulnerable to not being as relevant. So, just saying. Now, as for The Lion King, I believe that is an SS movie. I know there's that whole controversy with the Kimba the White Lion thing. Did Disney rip them off? I think they kind of did to a certain extent. That said, the final product is still wonderful. Now, Pocahontas, I actually like Pocahontas quite a bit. I'm giving that an A. Pocahontas, I think, has wonderful animation, great songs. I think it's a little bit more mature than most Disney movies. I mean, the thing that actually holds it down a couple pegs is that they even bothered to have comic relief in it. They actually should have really gone the full straight ahead with this movie, in the sense that there should have been no Miko, there should have been no bird, there should have been no dog, no pug dog to make jokes. They really should have made it Dances with Wolves meets Gone with the Wind like they had originally wanted. Now, that said, one of the reasons that it gets an A as opposed to a B is that I do give them a lot of credit for, well, two things. First of all, they did put the If I Never Knew You sequence back in the movie, which helped the movie tremendously. Also, it does have a very bittersweet ending, which is unusual for Disney movies. It's not all sunshine and roses. There are some sacrifices that are made in it. Now we get to my favorite Disney movie, and that's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In my opinion, this was probably Disney at one of their most daring. I loved the dark undertones. I loved the music, loved the score. I think Disney really took a chance and stepped outside of their comfort zone. Now, granted, they still had like the gargoyles, which were comic relief. And the gargoyles I give a minor pass to because it is suggested it might be in Quasimodo's head. So, who knows? But I think The Hunchback of Notre Dame is greatly overlooked because I think it's in a weird position. It's not really made for kids, but a lot of adults don't really want to watch it either. It's weird how that works out. But that's my favorite Disney movie. Now, we get to Hercules. And I'm going to give Hercules a C. I honestly think the best thing about it is the villain, which is Hades. And then it's kind of complicated with Hades because I actually think I want Hades to win in the movie. Hades he's too much fun to root against, and Hercules is a nice guy, but he's not that interesting, to be perfectly honest. And I think the songs are a little bit weaker on whole, although I do really like I Won't Say I'm in Love. So, I like the animation style with Hercules quite a bit. But man, it's just not that interesting for the most part. That's my opinion. You can, of course, disagree. Now, Mulan, I would definitely put in the S ranking, which is funny that I've been harping on the comedic sidekicks a lot, because I think Mulan kind of goes overboard with that as well. However, what Mulan overcomes in some of those shortfalls is a very unique story for a Disney film. Again, great music. Jerry Goldsmith, the legendary composer, did the score for this, and the songs are excellent. I mean, look, if you don't get teary-eyed when listening to Reflection, or you don't start wanting to sing along to I'll Make a Man Out of You, I don't know what to tell you at that point. And Mulan is a good character. She's a great role model, and she's a great role model for girls while not being threatening to boys. I think that was very, very key. And some of the animation sequences, particularly when the Huns are racing down the mountain and the birds flying over, I mean, that is just spectacular filmmaking, regardless what format it is. Now, Tarzan. I'm going to give Tarzan an A. I actually really, really enjoy Tarzan. And I like the Phil Collins soundtrack. Not going to lie. I think Tarzan, the Disney version, is probably the best film adaptation of the character I've ever seen, because it's the only version where Tarzan can actually almost surf on the trees, swing around. Like, he's not just swinging from vine to vine yelling. He's like twirling and diving, and he's speaking to the animals. And I think that makes like a strong case for why animation can be so good. They keep trying to make a new live action Tarzan movie and it keeps failing. I think they should go back to animation, and because animation, I think, is where Tarzan truly shines. Now, Fantasia 2000, I'm giving an S. And the only reason it's not getting an S is because, first of all, it is a sequel, so this isn't breaking new mold. Also, it emphasized humor a little bit more than artistic scenery, so that was a little disappointing. And they recycled The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which, hey, classic short. Totally love that cartoon. Don't need to see it again. But I do otherwise like it quite a bit. Now, Dinosaur, I'm going to give that a D. I remember when I saw it at the time, it was very impressive. And in fact, it's interesting that it's considered one of Walt Disney feature animations film, because when this movie was sold to people, it was sold on the idea that it looked real. It looked absolutely real. And now it's being called one of their animated films. And it, by the way, it looks animated now. I mean, at the time, it blew your mind. Now it doesn't look that impressive. And it's very similar to The Land Before Time. And spoiler alert, I would much rather watch The Land Before Time. Although, interestingly, Dinosaur and The Land Before Time both have two of my favorite movie scores of all time. So, go fig. Now, The Emperor's New Groove, I'm giving that an S. I mean, yeah, it's a comedy. It's totally a farce, but it's comedy at its best, and it's not going to be dated anytime soon. It is just genuinely funny, and it's just great. And by the way, Kronk, one of the best sidekick characters of all time, should not have his own movie, but for what he's in, it works very well. Now, Atlantis: The Lost Empire. I'm going to give that a B. I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people say it is. I think it's a little underrated. I understand what people are saying. I think it probably should have been 30 minutes longer. But I liked the characters quite a bit. I liked the sci-fi setting. I like the anime-style animation. My biggest gripe is that the journey seems to be over far too quickly. Like, it should be a 2.5 hour movie to emphasize the journey, but within 40 minutes or so, we're already at Atlantis, and it's not. But what is there is very good. Now, Lilo and Stitch, I'm giving that an A. The movie that almost single-handedly saved 2D animation because it was good. Who doesn't like Stitch? I like how this Lilo and Stitch actually has a little bit more bite than most Disney movies, no pun intended. It's a little bit meaner than you probably remember it. It's a little bit edgier, and yet it's still so heartwarming. And by the way, the watercolor painting is so beautiful in this movie. Now, Treasure Planet is another one that I think is underrated. Very underrated. That's I like the sci-fi settings. I like this version of Treasure Island, and I think this is probably one of the best portrayals of Long John Silver I've seen, which Disney had like a very difficult task with Long John Silver, because we all know Long John Silver is a bad guy. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We've heard the story too many times. And yet, by making Long John Silver the true father figure of Jim Hawkins' life, and someone who almost seems who falls so much in love with the boy that, in a fatherly sort of way, of course, that he starts having second thoughts about, what he's doing. I think that's a very complex character for a villain, a Disney villain. So I really liked it, and I think it was a very breathtaking movie personally. Now I'm gonna give Brother Bear just a little dip under, even though I think Brother Bear's fairly underrated. If only because I have to acknowledge all the problems in this movie. It's a little too silly in the middle. The Moose characters, while hilarious, don't really add much. The songs could be better, although I do like a couple of them. And I think it's another movie that kind of chickens out at the end. It approaches some very tough material, and it's too Disney-fied. That said, I do think it's good. By the way, C is not necessarily a bad row to be on. It's just a little underwhelming to be on. But now we have to get to a couple dumpster fires, I'm sorry to say. You have Home on the Range, which I hate. It annoys me that movie was what pretty much killed 2D animation for years, just years to come. And then you have Chicken Little, which was Disney trying to be Shrek, and not even understanding what made Shrek so good. Like, you watch those two movies, and they're pretty horrible. And by the way, Roseanne is one of my favorite shows, and so, when I can't even stand her in Home on the Range. Now, Meet the Robinsons, I'm going to put in the C category because I think Meet the Robinsons came so close to good. So close to good. I think the beginning was excellent. I think the ending is extremely effective. In fact, I don't think they spent enough time in that dark future that the hat created. I think the bowler hat guy is a great villain, a very unique villain. The problem is the middle of the movie. The middle of the movie is so random, so annoying, so off the walls bonkers, has so little to do with anything else that the movie's trying to do, that I actually knew a couple friends who actually got so annoyed by it they turned it off. And then they asked, how did it end? And I told them how it ended. And they were shocked. They were like, oh my gosh, that happens? I had no idea something was going to happen. We just thought it got really annoying. So I think Meet the Robinson, had it spent just a little more tightening with the script and removing some of the fluff in the middle, I think it could have been a very good movie. Shame it's not. Now, Bolt, I would put a little higher. I liked Bolt quite a bit. I like the Truman Show style story that Bolt had. Admittingly, I would have liked to have seen what Chris Sanders' version of the movie would have looked like. He directed Lilo and Stitch, and Lilo and Stitch a little higher, as you can see. However, I did enjoy what they ultimately made with Bolt. I think John Travolta was good as the Bolt. I liked the cat. Miley Cyrus, I could have taken her lead, but it's a girl, so it's the girl character, so the owner. Not that complicated. So next we have The Prince and the Frog, and admittingly, I'm a little sentimental to this one. I'm going to put The Prince and the Frog under S because I think it is underrated, and clearly I'm a fan. If you can see, you probably can't see the poster in the background now, but I like that Disney came back to 2D animation. I love that they did it in a strong way. It looked great. It had great story. It had a great villain, a wonderful villain song. Randy Newman, probably some of Randy Newman's best songs that he's ever written for a feature, to be honest. So I really liked it. And I'm also going to put Tangled in that category because even though it's computer animated, I think it captures the classic Disney style very, very well. Very, very well. And now we start getting to the end, and you're probably going to be surprised at where I put some of these. Winnie the Pooh. I'm actually going to put Winnie the Pooh under A. Because I do think this was well made. Granted, it's simple. It's barely over an hour. And yet, it was a great relaunching of the character that was super innocent and sweet, and yet it was still charming for adults. Then you have Wreck-It Ralph. I'm going to give Wreck-It Ralph... I'm also going to give that an A. Because I think Wreck-It Ralph... It's kind of interesting because even though it's about a video game character, it kind of follows the classic Disney story of someone wanting more out of their life and not finding it and having to face a evil adversary. It's, in a sense, the male version of a Disney princess movie. And I like that. And plus, it's kind of cool that video game characters are in it, particularly Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, Frozen. Where am I going to put Frozen? This one's going to be my most controversial, obviously. But I'm going to put Frozen as an SS. Yes, you probably thought I wasn't going to put anything in SS again. And many of you are probably going to shut the video off right now. I'm sorry, guys. It has to be said. Frozen is classic filmmaking. It's classic Disney. When I first saw it in 2014, me, my brother, and my dad saw my nose is itchy for some reason tonight. I'm so sorry, folks. We went to see a sneak preview of Frozen a week before, and we absolutely loved it. Now, when Let It Go first played, this was the first time I heard Let It Go. It wasn't on the radio everywhere. No one was singing along. Let It Go played, and we were watching it in the El Capitan in 3D, so blown away by the music and the visuals, me and my brother looked at each other and we were kind of like, whoa. Like we knew we just heard a classic song. I also knew at that point it was going to be everywhere. I totally called it. And Frozen is interesting because when it came out, people praised it up to the high heavens. And then it stayed at number one for weeks on end. And then the song wouldn't go away. And then people wouldn't shut up about it. And it's still kind of in a period where people still think it's overrated. But I said back then, and I meant it, and I still mean it with a caveat. I said Frozen is a classic movie, and people are saying, like, Tangled was better. And, hey, if you like Tangled better, that's fine. Totally up to you. But I told people, in 10 years, we will still be talking about Frozen and loving it. We probably won't be talking about Tangled as much, and or any of the other Disney movies within the last 10 years. And by the way, I've more or less been right on that prediction. Now, there is one thing that jeopardizes Frozen's legacy, and that's the sequel coming out. Because when that sequel comes out, it has to be as great as Frozen, and it's probably not going to be. And even if it is as great as the original Frozen, because we're still in the period where people just in general want it to go away for a little while, they don't want it to be there anymore, releasing a sequel could tarnish Frozen even more. So, while I do believe in 50 years, Frozen will still be considered an all-time classic and we'll still be watching it, I think Frozen 2 could destroy what little goodwill there is. But I truly believe that this definitely deserves to be top-tier Disney, in my opinion. Now then, let's get to slightly less controversial opinions. Big Hero 6, I'm going to give that not a C. I'm going to give it a B. I think it's very enjoyable. I'm certainly glad Disney made it. Not Academy Award worthy at all, but very entertaining. Zootopia, I would give an S. I think that dealt with a very timely subject in a very good way, and I think it's a subject that unfortunately might be relevant for a long, long time. As for Moana, I would also give that an S. Let's put it over here. Because I think Moana is, again, classic Disney princess story. Maybe not quite as good as Frozen or Hunchback or Lion King or Beauty and the Beast or Fantasia or Pinocchio, but very, very good nonetheless. Now, where do I put Ralph Breaks the Internet? This is by far the biggest question mark for a lot of people. I'm going to give it a C. And here's why. It was good. I did enjoy it. But here's the thing. First of all, it is a sequel. And I would rather Disney not make sequels for animated films. I'd rather them make a new movie. But it's also based on the internet, where they're making fun about Facebook, about Google, about MySpace, about Twitter, about YouTube. And who knows if these sites will even be around in 10 years. Out of all the movies on this list, Ralph Breaks the Internet that's right. Now here's the other thing I need to mention about this. This is kind of a graphic description, but I have to say, I told people, like, if watching Beauty and the Beast or Frozen is like watching Disney create magic, watching Wreck-It Ralph is like watching Disney masturbate. Because a whole lot of the movie hinges on, look, we own Star Wars, aren't we great? Look, we own Pixar, aren't we great? We own Winnie the Pooh, aren't we great? We own this, we own that. We look at all the princesses we create, aren't we great? Are we great? That's what it looks like. Disney is celebrating their own legacy, their Marvel creations, and they're just referencing other stuff that they're selling. It kind of feels almost like an infomercial to be on. In fact, I'm not going to bump it down because, again, it's entertaining. And the post-credit scene is admittedly one of the funniest things I'd seen in the theater in a long time. However, this is not the direction I want Disney movies to go. I want them to make original movies. I want them to make classic movies. Ralph Breaks the Internet is a sequel that is almost instantly dated. I mean, it should be telling. First of all, I will say Ralph Breaks the Internet is the movie the Emoji Movie probably should have been. But if you want to know why the Emoji Movie was one of the fastest animated films put into production, it's because the filmmakers felt they had to make it as fast as they could, because by the time the movie came out, the landscape of cell phones might change so much that the movie would no longer be relevant. I think that says a lot about making movies about characters in the internet. So, let's go over this one more time. In the complete dumpster fire of Disney movies, I put Saludos Amigos, Robin Hood, Home on the Range, and Chicken Little. Under the almost dumpster fire, but not quite, I've got Make My Music, Alice in Wonderland, The Sword and the Stone, The Aristocats, The Black Cauldron, and Dinosaur. Under the average category, I've got The Three Caballeros, Fun and Fancy Free, Melody Time, Cinderella, Peter Pan, The Rescuers, Hercules, Brother Bear, Meet the Robinsons, and Ralph Breaks the Internet. Under very good, I have Bambi, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, 101 Dalmatians, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Fox and the Hound, The Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, Atlantis the Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, Bolt, and Big Hero 6. Now, under very good movies, I have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I have Dumbo. I have Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, The Rescuers Down Under, Pocahontas, Tarzan, Lilo and Stitch, Winnie the Pooh, and Wreck-It Ralph. Now, under superb, I have The Jungle Book. I have The Little Mermaid. I have Aladdin, although, again, with a caveat, Aladdin might not age particularly well, so we got to keep an eye on that one. We have Mulan, Fantasia 2000, The Emperor's New Groove, The Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Zootopia, and Moana. And in my opinion, the 5 best of the best. These are the absolute most classic Disney movies. We have Pinocchio, Fantasia, Beauty and the Beast, which is the best thing they've ever made, The Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is my personal favorite, and Frozen. Yes, Frozen is still considered classic Disney movie, in my opinion. And look, I know Frozen 2 will definitely affect how people view that. I still think, long term, Frozen will be watched way more than most of these movies. However, that's my opinion. What are yours? Where would you rank these? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. If you enjoy my videos, consider becoming a Patreon member. It's totally optional, but even as little as $1 goes a long way to helping the channel run smoothly. And hey, if this gets like 100 likes or so, we'll do a sequel. Maybe we'll do the Pixar movies, maybe the direct-to-video Disney movies, the live action, who knows? The sky's the limit. I could definitely have a lot of fun with this tier maker thing. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.